Can't you just go by something easier? Those 7 words echoed in the conference room like a slap across the face. 26-year-old Aisha Okafor had just presented the most innovative marketing strategy the advertising agency had seen in years, but all they could focus on was her name. Clients will have trouble pronouncing it, they said. Maybe something more. American-friendly? What they didn't know was that they had just planted the seed of their own destruction. This is the story of how racism disguised as practicality created a multi-million-dollar empire. It's about a woman whose African name was considered a liability in corporate America, until she turned that very name into one of the most recognizable brands in the beauty industry. It's about the hidden cost of cultural prejudice, not just to those who suffer it, but to those who practice it. Aisha's journey from dismissed employee to CEO represents more than personal triumph. It exposes a devastating truth about American business. While nearly 20% of job candidates change their names on resumes due to discrimination concerns, and people with African-American sounding names receive 50% fewer interview callbacks, the very diversity that companies reject is often the source of their most innovative ideas. From the hallways of Madison Avenue to the boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies, name-based discrimination has cost American business billions in lost talent and missed opportunities. But sometimes, that discrimination creates something more powerful. Then it destroys the unstoppable force of someone who refuses to hide who they are. When they mocked her name, they thought they were teaching her about business. Instead, they were about to learn the most expensive lesson in marketing history. Authenticity isn't just morally right, it's incredibly profitable. Are you ready to discover what happens when discrimination meets determination? Aisha Okafor was born in 1987 in Brooklyn, New York, to Nigerian parents who had immigrated to America in the early 1980s, with nothing but medical degrees and unwavering faith in the American dream. Her father, Dr. Emeka Okafor, was a cardiologist. Her mother, Dr. Ngozi Okafor, specialized in pediatrics. They chose the name Aisha, meaning alive in Arabic and life in Swahili, as a promise that their daughter would thrive in a new country while honoring her African heritage. The Okafor household was a sanctuary of culture and achievement. Conversations flowed seamlessly between English and Igbo. Nigerian jollof rice was served alongside American hamburgers. Traditional African fabrics hung next to Aisha's honor roll certificates. Her parents had integrated into American society without sacrificing their identity, and they expected their daughter to do the same. But the world outside their home was less accommodating. From kindergarten through high school, Aisha's name became a daily source of frustration and embarrassment, not for her, but for teachers, classmates, and administrators who seemed incapable of learning its simple pronunciation, Aisha. Instead, she endured Aisha, Asia, Ashley, and countless mangled attempts that reduced her identity to something unrecognizable. The 1990s and early 2000s were a complex time for African identity in America. While hip-hop culture was celebrating Black excellence in African heritage, corporate America remained decidedly unwelcoming to overt displays of ethnic identity. The prevailing wisdom was assimilation. Succeed by fitting in, not by standing out. Studies were already documenting what researchers would later call resume whitening, the practice of changing ethnic names and downplaying cultural markers to improve job prospects. Aisha's experience reflected this broader pattern. During high school, guidance counselors suggested she consider using Aisha O on college applications to avoid any confusion. Standardized test administrators regularly asked if she had spelled her name correctly. Even well-meaning teachers would ask if she had a nickname that might be easier for everyone. But Aisha's parents had prepared her for this. Your name carries the dreams of ancestors and the hopes of generations, her mother would tell her. Anyone who cannot learn to say it correctly is telling you something about their limitations, not yours. At Syracuse University, where she studied marketing and communications, Aisha encountered the full spectrum of American attitudes toward ethnic identity. Some professors made genuine efforts to pronounce her name correctly and learn about her background. Others defaulted to calling on her only when discussing diversity issues or multicultural perspectives, as if her Africanness was her only qualification. The campus environment of the mid-2000s was particularly challenging for students with ethnic names. Post-9/11 paranoia had created additional scrutiny for anyone perceived as foreign, even American-born students like Aisha. Resume workshops advise students to consider your audience when deciding how to present their names. Career counselors regularly suggested that ethnic names might be challenging for potential employers. Despite these obstacles, Aisha excelled academically and creatively. Her senior thesis examined the disconnect between America's increasingly diverse consumer base and the homogeneous marketing strategies of major brands. She argued that companies were leaving billions of dollars on the table by failing to authentically connect with ethnic communities. Her research was prescient, anticipating trends that wouldn't become mainstream until years later. The broader cultural context was equally important. This was the era of colorblind corporate policies that claimed to ignore race while perpetuating racial inequalities. Companies celebrated diversity in their annual reports while maintaining overwhelmingly white leadership teams. Marketing departments created urban campaigns that seemed designed by people who had never actually spent time in urban communities. Research was already documenting the business impact of this cultural disconnect. Studies showed that ethnic consumers were increasingly skeptical of brands that seemed to ignore or misunderstand their communities. Yet most companies continued operating as if America was still the homogeneous market of the 1950s. By the time Aisha graduated in 2009, she was acutely aware of both the challenges and opportunities ahead. The advertising industry she was entering was notorious for its lack of diversity. Less than 5% of creative directors were people of color, and even fewer were women. Companies regularly struggled to connect with diverse audiences because their leadership teams lacked the cultural understanding to do so authentically. But Aisha also recognized that this represented an enormous opportunity. Someone who could bridge these cultural gaps, someone who understood both mainstream American business culture and the authentic experiences of diverse communities, could potentially revolutionize how brands connected with consumers. She just didn't expect the lesson to begin with her own name being the problem. The interview at Hartwell & Associates had gone perfectly. For 3 hours, Aisha had impressed the senior partners with her portfolio, her strategic thinking, and her fresh perspective on consumer engagement. The boutique advertising agency, known for its blue-chip clients and Madison Avenue pedigree, seemed ready to make an offer for their junior account executive position. Then came the moment that changed everything. "Before we proceed," said Richard Hartwell III, the agency's founding partner, leaning back in his leather chair, "I want to address something that might be challenging for our clients." He paused, studying Aisha with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to making difficult decisions. "Your name, Aisha. It's very ethnic." The conference room fell silent. Aisha felt her stomach drop, but her expression remained composed. Years of similar encounters had taught her to stay calm while her world shifted beneath her feet. "I'm sorry," she replied evenly, though she knew exactly where this conversation was heading. "Don't get me wrong," Hartwell continued, his tone suggesting he believed he was being helpful. "You're clearly talented. Your work is impressive. But our clients, Fortune 500 companies, major consumer brands, they're very traditional, conservative. They might have trouble with your name being so obviously African." Jennifer Morrison, the creative director who had championed Aisha's candidacy, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She had been enthusiastic about Aisha's fresh perspective just minutes earlier, but now seemed uncertain how to respond to her boss's concerns. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Aisha asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Well," Hartwell said, warming to his theme, "have you ever considered using a more approachable version? Maybe just A. Okafor? Or perhaps you have a middle name?" that might be more client-friendly? The euphemisms were stunning in their transparency. Client-friendly, approachable, traditional. Each word was a polite way of saying what he really meant. White-sounding names were acceptable. African names were not. "My name is Aisha," she replied firmly. "It means alive in Arabic and life in Swahili. I was named after Aisha bint Abu Bakr, one of the most influential women in Islamic history. It's been my name for 26 years, and it will continue to be my name." Hartwell's smile became strained. "I understand the cultural significance, but business is business. Our clients invest millions in their brand relationships. They need to feel comfortable with every aspect of their agency partnerships. If something as simple as a name creates unnecessary friction, you're asking me to change my identity to make your clients more comfortable with their own prejudices," Aisha said, no longer bothering to soften her words. "I'm asking you to be practical," Hartwell shot back, his veneer of politeness finally cracking. "This isn't about prejudice. It's about market realities. Consumers respond better to brands they understand, trust, and relate to. If a client can't pronounce your name, how can they build a relationship with you?" The irony was breathtaking. Here was an advertising executive, someone whose job was supposedly understanding diverse markets, arguing that ethnic names were incompatible with business success. His own industry's research contradicted everything he was saying. Studies showed that ethnic consumers, who represented trillions in purchasing power, were increasingly drawn to brands that demonstrated authentic cultural understanding. "So your solution," Aisha said slowly, "is to hide the very diversity that could help you connect with diverse markets?" "Our solution," Morrison interjected, trying to salvage the situation, "is to be strategic about how we present our team to clients. Maybe you could use Aisha professionally but introduce yourself differently in client meetings." The suggestion was even worse than Hartwell's direct demand for name change. They wanted her to code switch her identity based on the comfort level of whoever was in the room. It was discrimination with a smile, racism dressed up as business strategy. "Let me understand this correctly," Aisha said, gathering her portfolio materials. "You want to hire me because I bring a fresh perspective to your team. But you want me to hide the very background that gives me that perspective? You're being overly sensitive," Hartwell said dismissively. "This is how business works. Everyone makes compromises to succeed. Jackie Robinson didn't refuse to play baseball because some fans were uncomfortable with his presence. He proved himself through performance." The comparison was so tone-deaf that Aisha almost laughed. Jackie Robinson didn't change his name to Jack Robertson to make white fans more comfortable. He succeeded precisely because he refused to hide who he was. The meeting deteriorated quickly from there. Hartwell became defensive, insisting that Aisha was making this about race when it was simply about business practicality. Morrison tried to play peacemaker, suggesting they could revisit the conversation after everyone had time to think, but Aisha was done thinking. As she walked toward the elevator, her mind was already racing with possibilities. These people had just revealed something crucial about the advertising industry. They were so disconnected from diverse markets that they viewed ethnic names as liabilities rather than assets. The elevator ride down from the 32nd floor gave her time to process what had just happened. She wasn't hurt. She was energized. Hartwell and Associates had just shown her exactly what was wrong with corporate America's approach to diversity. They wanted the benefits of diverse perspectives without the inconvenience of actual diversity. She stepped onto the busy Manhattan street. Aisha pulled out her phone and called her mother. "Mama," she said, "I just had the most important meeting of my life." "Did you get the job?" Dr. Ngozi Okafor asked. "No," Aisha replied, smiling as pedestrians streamed around her. "I got something better. I got an idea." That night, Aisha sat in her small Brooklyn apartment, surrounded by marketing textbooks, industry reports, and her own research from college. She began sketching out a business plan that would change everything. If traditional agencies couldn't see the value in authentic, cultural connections, She would build a company that could. The plan was audacious. A beauty and lifestyle brand that would celebrate ethnic names, cultural authenticity, and the purchasing power of diverse communities. Instead of hiding her African heritage, she would make it the cornerstone of her business strategy. Instead of code switching to make others comfortable, she would create a space where others could be authentically themselves. The brand would be called exactly what Hartwell and Associates found so problematic: Aisha. And every product, every campaign, every business decision would demonstrate that ethnic identity wasn't a liability. It was a superpower. As she worked late into the night, Aisha couldn't help but smile at the irony. Hartwell had been right about one thing. Business was indeed business. He just had no idea how profitable authentic business could be. Building a business around ethnic authenticity in 2009 meant swimming against every current in American corporate culture. While Aisha was developing her brand concept, the country was grappling with the aftermath of the financial crisis, and traditional beauty companies were doubling down on safe marketing strategies that appealed to mainstream consumers. The first challenge was funding. Aisha's business plan for Aisha Beauty was revolutionary but risky. Traditional investors couldn't understand why anyone would deliberately build a brand around an ethnic name that customers might have trouble pronouncing. Her pitch meetings became exercises in cultural education as venture capitalists struggled to comprehend her target market. But who exactly would buy this? Asked one potential investor during a particularly frustrating presentation. I mean, how big is the market for ethnic beauty products? The question revealed the profound disconnect between investor perceptions and market reality. African American women alone spent over $7 billion annually on beauty products, but most investors remained fixated on the mainstream market they understood. Aisha found herself explaining basic demographics to people who claimed to be market experts. The rejection pattern was depressingly predictable. Investors would express initial interest in her business acumen and market research, then grow skeptical when she explained that ethnic authenticity was a feature, not a bug. They wanted her to broaden the appeal or consider a more universal brand name. The very authenticity that made her concept powerful was precisely what made investors nervous. After 6 months of unsuccessful fundraising, Aisha made a difficult decision. She would bootstrap the company using her own savings, credit cards, and any other resources she could access. It meant scaling back her original plans dramatically, but it also meant maintaining complete control over her vision. The second challenge was manufacturing. Aisha's concept required cosmetics specifically formulated for deeper skin tones, products that major manufacturers had largely ignored. Finding suppliers willing to work with a startup on specialized formulations proved nearly impossible. Most manufacturers focused on lighter skin tones because that's where they perceived the largest market opportunity. We don't really have experience with those kinds of products, one potential manufacturer told her delicately. The phrase, "those kinds of products," became a recurring theme in her outreach efforts. Companies that regularly produced hundreds of variations of foundation couldn't suddenly figure out how to create quality products for Black and brown consumers. Aisha eventually found a small, family-owned laboratory in New Jersey that specialized in custom formulations. The owner, Maria Santos, was a Puerto Rican chemist who understood both the technical challenges and market opportunity. Together, they developed a line of foundations, concealers, and lip colors that celebrated the full spectrum of human skin tones. The third challenge was distribution. Major beauty retailers remained skeptical about dedicating shelf space to a brand built around ethnic authenticity. Buyer meetings followed a familiar pattern: polite interest, followed by concerns about limited market appeal, followed by suggestions to start smaller in urban markets. "We love the concept," one buyer at a major cosmetics chain told her, "but our customers might not understand what Aisha means. Have you considered a more descriptive brand name?" The suggestion that customers couldn't handle a 3-syllable African name while successfully navigating brands like L'Occitane Kiehl's, and Lancôme was infuriating in its obvious double standard. Aisha began documenting these interactions, building a file of corporate responses that revealed the unconscious bias permeating the beauty industry. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: social media. In 2010, platforms like Facebook and YouTube were enabling direct connections between brands and consumers without traditional retail gatekeepers. Aisha launched her company online, using her own story of name discrimination to connect with customers who had similar experiences. Her first video blog post, titled, "They Called My Name Unprofessional," went viral within weeks. Thousands of women shared their own stories of being told their names were too ethnic for corporate environments. The comment section became a support group for people who had faced similar discrimination. "I changed my resume from Priyanka to P. Shah to get callbacks," wrote one commenter. "Seeing you embrace your name gives me courage to reclaim mine. My daughter's name is Keiko, and I worry about her future job prospects," wrote another. "Your brand shows her that her Japanese heritage is something to celebrate, not hide." The community that formed around Aisha Beauty wasn't just buying cosmetics. They were buying validation. Each purchase was a statement that ethnic names, cultural authenticity, and diverse beauty deserved recognition and respect. As sales grew, so did the backlash. Anonymous online commenters criticized the brand as divisive and reverse racist. Some accused Aisha of playing the race card for business purposes. Traditional beauty blogs questioned whether ethnic-focused brands were sustainable long-term. The criticism stung, but it also validated what Aisha had suspected. American business culture remained deeply uncomfortable with explicit celebrations of non-white identity. Companies could embrace diversity as long as it remained safely abstract. Actually centering ethnic identity as a business strategy challenged assumptions that many people weren't ready to examine. The financial pressure was relentless. Bootstrap funding meant that every business decision carried personal financial consequences. Aisha maxed out credit cards, borrowed against her college savings, and took on freelance marketing projects to keep the company afloat. There were months when she chose between paying for inventory or paying rent, but something remarkable was happening in the market. Word-of-mouth marketing was driving sales growth faster than traditional advertising ever could. Customers weren't just buying products. They were becoming brand ambassadors, sharing their experiences with friends and family who had similar struggles with representation in mainstream beauty. By late 2011, Aisha Beauty had achieved something unprecedented. A cosmetics brand built around ethnic authenticity was outperforming established competitors in its target demographic. The same investors who had questioned the market viability of ethnic names were now calling to schedule meetings. The woman whose name had been called a liability was proving that authenticity wasn't just morally right. It was incredibly profitable. And this was only the beginning. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March 2012, exactly 3 years after the Hartwell and Associates rejection that had launched Aisha's journey. Jennifer Morrison, the creative director who had sat silently while her boss demanded Aisha change her name, was on the line. "Aisha," Morrison said, her voice carrying a mixture of professional courtesy and barely concealed desperation. "I hope you remember me. We'd love to discuss a potential partnership opportunity." The irony was delicious. Hartwell and Associates, the agency that had considered her name too ethnic for their clients, was now facing a crisis that only authentic cultural understanding could solve. Their biggest client, a multinational beauty conglomerate, had watched Aisha Beauty's meteoric rise with growing alarm. While traditional brands struggled to connect with diverse consumers, this small startup had captured market share by doing exactly what established companies couldn't: treating ethnic identity as an asset rather than a liability. The client had delivered an ultimatum: develop an authentic diversity strategy or lose a $50 million account. Suddenly, the agency that had dismissed ethnic names as business liabilities was desperately seeking the cultural expertise they had previously rejected. "What kind of partnership did you have in mind?" Aisha asked, already knowing the answer. Well, Morrison said carefully, we're looking for strategic guidance on multicultural marketing. Given your success with diverse demographics, we thought there might be mutual benefits to collaboration. The euphemisms were still there. Diverse demographics instead of black and brown consumers, but the power dynamic had fundamentally shifted. Aisha was no longer the job candidate, being told to hide her identity. She was the CEO whose authentic approach had proven more effective than their traditional strategies. The meeting took place in the same conference room where Hartwell had suggested she change her name. As Aisha entered, now flanked by her own team of advisors, she noted how the space felt smaller than she remembered. The intimidating atmosphere that had once made her feel diminished now seemed merely pretentious. Hartwell himself looked uncomfortable as he began his presentation about the agency's evolving approach to multicultural engagement. He spoke about embracing authentic voices and leveraging diverse perspectives, without apparent awareness that he was describing exactly what Aisha had offered 3 years earlier. Our client research indicates, he said, consulting his notes, that consumers increasingly value brands that demonstrate genuine cultural understanding. They're drawn to authentic narratives that reflect their own experiences and identities. Aisha almost smiled. This was her undergraduate thesis, regurgitated as if it were a fresh insight. The same research she had presented during her job interview was now being pitched back to her as revolutionary thinking. The client's demands were specific. They wanted Aisha Beauty to partner with them on a co-branded product line that would help them access the ethnic beauty market. In exchange, they offered distribution through major retail chains, manufacturing, partnerships, and a marketing budget that exceeded Aisha's current annual revenue. It was everything she had dreamed of: validation, resources, and the opportunity to scale her business exponentially. But it came with conditions that revealed how little the corporate world truly understood about authentic cultural engagement. The co-branded products would carry both names, Morrison explained, but we'd need to develop messaging that appeals to broader audiences, something that celebrates diversity without alienating mainstream consumers. There it was, the fundamental misunderstanding that plagued corporate diversity efforts. They wanted the benefits of authentic cultural connection without the risks of actually centering diverse voices. They envisioned a diluted version of Aisha's brand that would be palatable to consumers who remained uncomfortable with explicit ethnic pride. You want to use my name and my community's purchasing power, Aisha said slowly, but you want to control the message to ensure it doesn't challenge anyone's comfort zone. Hartwell shifted uncomfortably. We're talking about strategic positioning that maximizes market appeal across all demographic segments. The translation was clear. They wanted to profit from diversity while maintaining the same cultural assumptions that had led them to reject her in the first place. It was inclusion theater, the appearance of authentic partnership without the substance of shared power or genuine cultural understanding. Aisha stood up, gathering her materials. Gentlemen, 3 years ago you told me my name was a liability. Today you're asking me to help you profit from the very authenticity you once found so problematic. But you're still approaching this the same way, looking for ways to package diversity that won't threaten your existing worldview. The room fell silent. Morrison looked stricken. Hartwell appeared angry. We're offering you everything you said you wanted, Hartwell said defensively. National distribution, unlimited marketing budget, partnership with a Fortune 500 company. What more could you possibly need? Aisha smiled as she reached the door. I need partners who understand that my name isn't something to be managed or marketed around. It's something to be celebrated. When you're ready for that conversation, call me. As the elevator doors closed, Aisha felt the same clarity she had experienced 3 years earlier. But this time she wasn't leaving empty-handed. She was leaving as the person who had proven them wrong about everything. By 2015, Aisha Beauty had become more than a cosmetics company. It had evolved into a cultural movement. The brand that began with one woman's refusal to hide her identity had grown into a $50 million business that challenged every assumption about ethnic marketing in America. The numbers told a remarkable story. Aisha Beauty's customer retention rates exceeded industry averages by 340%. Their social media engagement metrics were 500% higher than traditional beauty brands. Most significantly, their customers weren't just buying products, they were buying into a vision of America where ethnic names, cultural authenticity, and diverse beauty were celebrated rather than hidden. The company's success had forced the entire beauty industry to reconsider their approach to diverse markets. Major cosmetics brands that had previously offered token diversity lines began developing comprehensive product ranges for deeper skin tones. Marketing campaigns that once featured diversity as an afterthought now placed it at the center of their messaging. But Aisha's impact extended far beyond cosmetics. Her story had become a case study in business schools across the country, demonstrating how authentic cultural understanding could create competitive advantages that traditional marketing strategies couldn't match. MBA programs that once taught students to adapt to market expectations now included modules on leveraging cultural authenticity as a business strategy. The ripple effects were profound. Other entrepreneurs with ethnic names began building brands around their cultural identities, rather than hiding them. The resume whitening phenomenon that had affected 20% of job seekers began declining as companies recognized the business value of diverse perspectives. Aisha had proven that ethnic names weren't barriers to business success. They were pathways to untapped markets. Her annual Names Have Power conference had become the premier gathering for multicultural entrepreneurs and corporate diversity officers. The event featured panel discussions, networking opportunities, and workshops designed to help business leaders understand the economic impact of cultural authenticity. Fortune 500 companies sent executives to learn strategies they couldn't develop internally. The personal transformation was equally remarkable. The woman who had once been told her name was too ethnic for corporate America now regularly advised CEOs on multicultural market strategy. Her LinkedIn profile, which she had once considered sanitizing to appear more professional, became a powerful statement about the value of authentic self-presentation. The conference room where Hartwell had suggested she change her name had become an unlikely symbol of progress. In 2016, Aisha Beauty acquired Hartwell & Associates, which had never recovered from losing their major client. The acquisition wasn't revenge, it was integration. Aisha retained several talented employees while transforming the agency into a multicultural marketing consultancy. Morrison, the creative director who had championed Aisha's candidacy, but remained silent during the discriminatory interview, became one of her most effective allies. Her experience witnessing workplace discrimination had motivated her to become an advocate for inclusive hiring practices. She now led diversity training workshops that used Aisha's story to help managers recognize and address their unconscious biases. The broader cultural impact was perhaps most significant. Aisha's success had contributed to a national conversation about name discrimination that resulted in policy changes across various industries. Several states passed legislation prohibiting employers from rejecting candidates based on name pronunciation difficulty. Professional organizations developed guidelines for inclusive hiring practices that specifically addressed ethnic name bias. The beauty industry itself had been fundamentally transformed. Products that once relegated deeper skin tones to narrow ethnic categories now featured comprehensive shade ranges as standard practice. Marketing campaigns that once defaulted to European beauty standards now celebrated global definitions of attractiveness. The change wasn't just cosmetic, it represented a fundamental shift in how companies understood their diverse customer base. Educational institutions also evolved. Business schools that once advised students to consider marketable professional presentations now encouraged authentic personal branding. Career counseling services that had suggested ethnic name modification began training counselors to support students in leveraging their cultural identities as professional assets. By 2018, Aisha Beauty had expanded internationally, with distribution in 12 countries and product lines specifically developed for regional preferences. The company's success had inspired similar brands in other markets, creating a global movement of culturally authentic businesses. The woman whose name had been mocked as unprofessional now employed over 200 people, generated annual revenues exceeding $100 million, and had fundamentally changed how American business approached cultural diversity. Her African name, once considered a liability, had become one of the most recognizable brands in beauty. The transformation was complete. Discrimination had created its own antidote. Aisha Okafor's journey from rejected job candidate to industry revolutionary illuminates a truth that discriminatory systems consistently fail to grasp. The very diversity they seek to suppress often contains the innovations they desperately need. When Hartwell and Associates suggested she change her name, they revealed their profound misunderstanding of modern American markets. They wanted to serve diverse consumers while maintaining homogeneous perspectives. They sought multicultural profits while rejecting multicultural authenticity. Their approach wasn't just morally wrong, it was economically obsolete. Aisha's success demonstrates that the choice between cultural authenticity and business success is a false dichotomy created by people who understand neither culture nor business. Her name wasn't an obstacle to overcome, it was an asset to leverage. Her African heritage wasn't something to minimize, it was something to monetize. The very identity that made corporate America uncomfortable made diverse consumers feel seen, understood, and valued. The broader implications extend far beyond the beauty industry. In an increasingly diverse America, companies that continue operating from outdated assumptions about mainstream consumers are voluntarily limiting their market potential. The entrepreneurs they dismiss today for being too ethnic or too different are the same people who understand the multicultural markets of tomorrow. Research continues to show that ethnic name discrimination costs American businesses billions in lost talent and missed opportunities. But Aisha's story proves that discrimination also creates opportunities for those brave enough to compete authentically. Examine your own biases about names and cultural identity. Support businesses that celebrate rather than hide ethnic authenticity. If you're in hiring positions, implement blind resume reviews and pronunciation training. If you have an ethnic name, consider whether you're hiding an asset that could become your greatest strength. Remember, in a diverse world, authenticity isn't just right, it's profitable. The question isn't whether you can afford to embrace diversity. It's whether you can afford not to. What's in your name, and what empire might you build around it?